Okay, great. Let me just first start out introducing, let Torn introduce himself. I'll introduce myself. Before we do that, I just want to thank Ron Gerber and Angel Beach for having us. We always enjoy your events, and so thank you for having us today. Torn, go ahead and introduce yourself first.
So, thank you, Jay. So my name is Torn Lim. I also work with Jay very closely, actually supporting our DoD customer at Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft roughly about 8 years now. Been doing a lot of stuff on the endpoint side early on as a consultant, but recently transitioned over to what we call a cybersecurity technical specialist role. So dealing with a lot with our security products along with zero trust as well.
Great.
One thing, I don't know about other people, there's a little bit of an echo. And so I'm not sure if there's a different microphone you can use. Just be aware of that, okay?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, Torn, you'll probably fix that while I'm presenting, and you should be good by the time I'm done. All right, folks. So I'm Jay Pelletier. I've been working with Microsoft for about 6 years. Prior to that, I have a long history, as Ron said, working with a variety of three-letter agencies. I started my career actually being turned on to using data and analytics for good. Back in my early days when 9/11 happened, I was part of a team that helped secure the World Series using data analytics and real-time responses for that event. If anyone can remember back then, the World Series was right around the corner after 9/11 occurred, and part of our mission as unifying the country was to not let the bad guys win and actually have our World Series and show them that America is strong and tough. And so it was a wonderful thing to be a part of. And from there, I really turned my career into focusing on catching bad guys, being involved in using IT, for the good of society. And lo and behold, after a long career, I landed at Microsoft only about 6 years ago. I have many of my colleagues that have worked here much longer, including Torn. We continue to fight the good fight here. And I'm going to go over a few different things today. Torn and I are going to discuss, some of the ways Microsoft really, helps, fight the cyber fight. Some of the ways that we're doing that, some of the ways we connect our capabilities and platforms together to unify data, which is we found to be an extremely big linchpin in being able to effectively see around blind spots and be effective in cyber. So the reason why I start with this big eye chart, those of you who may have been in some of my other presentations before, is so I could basically point out that it's not about Microsoft. As you can see here, there's a myriad of capabilities here that are all brought together. And we do this through what we call our MISA program, which is our Microsoft Integrated Security Association program. And our customers, we realize that our customers don't just use Microsoft. It's a big part of what they use in their organizations. Microsoft's, their operating system typically, your typical suspects like Exchange and Office 365 are very common across the world, right? But we also realize that there's a whole bunch of different tools and technologies that we need to integrate with in order to help our customers, basically operate safer. So as you can see, all of our cloud security services span across our customers' devices, endpoints, including mobile, information, data protections, cloud app security, as well as management and governance of all this. And we provide such things, the usual things that you see in other platforms like dashboards, alerts, reports, and recommended actions. But where we really sit, which gives us a massive advantage, is our use of AI and machine learning that's built into all this technology. This has been a buzzword lately, but it has always, in my 6 years, been built into our capabilities. Sentinel, our Defender suite, we've always been starting to leverage and expand our AI. And now it's gotten to a point where it's really starting to move across the different pillars in zero trust that Torm will speak to later on. Now, the second reason why I want to start with the slide is the label in red, which is in the middle there. It deserves a much bigger box and highlighting, but I can kind of, if you guys can't read it, basically that's Microsoft's threat intelligence. Okay, some of it, some people know it as our security graph. Some people know it as our fabric, and it really represents the core of Microsoft's unique strength as a world provider of cybersecurity. So our threat intelligence includes human expertise and experts. We have the luxury of having a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity budget. In 2021, Satya, our CEO, vowed to spend $20 billion over the next 5 years. And we have upwards of around 3,500 cyber professionals in our organization. Now, the value of that and the 67 trillion signals per day that are brought in through our myriad of 200 plus services really provides the data and intelligence and the backbone that is needed to help work with those three-letter agencies and help secure even the Department of Defense. So the goal of our presentation today and what we'll be focusing on really includes giving you an understanding about Microsoft's use of these 67 trillion signals, how we're applying AI and dynamic self-learning models and machine learning to really drastically reduce noise and improve response times in organizations. Now, this is far-reaching effects. This is global. We do massive things like helping keep up, for example, the Ukraine. Taking down some of the largest botnets in the world and child pornography rings and human trafficking rings. So we do a lot of good at Microsoft in terms of what we do with our data and protecting the world. The other part of this presentation is we're going to pivot over to a discussion about zero trust. And Chorn is one of our thought leaders of zero trust in our organization. He works directly with our Department of Defense and helping them set up the latest published zero trust framework that recently was published back in November. And so Chorn was a big part of that. And so we're blessed to have him here and to go over some of that experience, as well as some of his expertise around that topic. So let's dig in. So we have, Microsoft has over 1.2 billion PCs and servers and IoT devices that run variations of Windows operating systems, including HoloLens and Xbox, and that provide anonymized telemetry to our security graph or to that threat intelligence. Hundreds of millions of iOS and Android and mobile devices, plus Mac OS and Linux and IoT endpoints access Microsoft services. And we have more than 1 billion users of our Azure cloud services. So you just think about all this data and telemetry that we have. With power comes great responsibility. So a couple of statistical things for you numbers fans out there. We've received anonymized telemetry of more than 1.5 billion Windows PCs across both customer and commercial segments. Azure has over 1 billion users of cloud services. And in our consumer space, there's more than 70 million active Xbox gamers. So in terms of transaction stats, every month we produce or process more than 630 billion identity transactions, right? So who knows all this and who knows how to analyze this data better than Microsoft, right? And we have over the years built trained models, and the model is becoming more and more intelligent and building it upon itself to help better secure our customers as well as Microsoft itself, because we are, quite frankly, a large target as well. So Microsoft Extended Detection Response really is focused on providing visibility across all of our customers' entire digital estates. So Microsoft Research really continues to train what we're calling Security Copilot. So you can access some of our hunter-trained machine learning models right now as Microsoft 365 Defender, automated attack disruption, and all these other features that are being available. Another thing that we're seeing in the market space is ChatGPT and its innovative use in security. Example of how a lot of that's being leveraged is simplifying analytics across platforms and across technologies. So in traditional SOCs, we have a SIEM model, right? And so let me catch up the slides here. You guys should be seeing the AI signals. Okay, good. So in the traditional model, we have a SIEM solution, right? And so part of the linchpin of a lot of SIEM solutions is they all use kind of a search processing language. So I'm getting kind of in the weeds here, so bear with me. I'll step it up a level for you or less technical folks, but they have a search processing language that analysts use to find needles in the haystack, find bad guys across their organizations. And this search processing language really is a language. So it takes time to learn. It takes just like French or Chinese or Russian. If you were going to learn that language to become proficient in it, it would take a lot of time and studies and practice. And so there's few people. There's no secret that we have a shortage of cyber folks. And so what ChatGPT is doing is very simplifying those language models that we use to search across those platforms and databases to link systems together to find the adversaries within our holistic ecosystems. So this is very exciting. It's going to speed up analytic times. It's going to speed up response times and have a great effect on analysts being more effective with their jobs, which will help better secure our organizations and effectively make people more safe to operate in the world. So we're very excited about that technology being used as well. Now, one of the things I spoke about, kind of backing up to a higher level here, is some of the things we're doing across in the world, right? Some of the differences we're making in the world. And one of the things that's very true about cybercrime is really it's borderless, right? So it impacts victims across the globe, and law enforcement's authority can be very constrained by jurisdiction and limitations of legal processes and information, that is really beyond our national borders. So fighting cybercrime really requires a strong international, public, and private partnerships. So we really partner with national and international law enforcement, as well as security firms, researchers, NGOs, and as well as our customers, obviously. And through our partnerships, we can act faster, really, to stop the harm to our nation and customers, and help develop evidence for law enforcement that they can use to derive arrests and so forth. Now, so working with a law enforcement, our digital crimes unit has rescued nearly 800 million devices from botnets and stopped fake websites linked to phishing campaigns and fights, as I mentioned, online pornography and child exploitation and so forth. One of the examples of our digital crimes work is photo DNA. Now, this is a robust hashing technology, basically, that adds a digital fingerprint to images and videos of exploited children. So photo DNA allows law enforcement to pre-identify 85% of the images seized on hard drives, for example, so they can focus on the remaining 15% not seen by investigators previously. Microsoft, donates this technology, which is used by numerous law enforcement and nonprofit groups around the world. We also have very similar technologies that we use and leverage to identify deepfakes, which is a massive threat right now. Some of you might know what deepfakes are, but essentially this is a big concern that can cause and wreak serious havoc. So that's another whole discussion to be had. So let's give a quick example, kind of back to the in the weeds approach here, of how AI is an example of how AI has been used in a past cyber incident, to kind of pull it all together for you, and whether you're technical or not. In 2019, quite a few years ago at this point, a high school economics teacher, we'll call him Mr. Cotta. I'll date myself if anyone remembers that show. So Mr. Cotta in rural Midwest was working on his district issued Windows 8 PC. He was running the G Suite education and using his built-in Windows 8 email app, and he checked his personal Gmail account. during school hours. And unbeknownst to him, he had received an email with a Trojan with a basically like with an attachment affected with a brand new variant, the emotant, what we call the emotant Trojan. In fact, this variant was so new that I'm trying to click into here. There we go. This variant was so new that basically he was the first person to ever encounter it. So no signature yet existed to help identify this as a new threat. So here's what happened next. Basically, Mr. Cotta double-clicked the attachment to open it, and then before the attachment could open, Windows and the built-in mail client queried about, at the time, it was only 80 plus cloud-based machine learning models. We have far more than that now to really ask for the determination as to whether this was a malicious or benign file. And in parallel, the file detonated in an isolated cloud VM while AI basically watched to see what would happen if the file was opened. Both the cloud models and the detonation service determined that the file was malicious, blocked it from opening, and deleted it from the PC. The file was then flagged for human security analysts to go in and basically protect the rest of our customers from this. So, and this all happened in 400 milliseconds. So in the blink of an eye. This was back in 2019. So imagine what we're doing now today with this technology. So the larger scale attack example, most of you heard of SolarWinds. This was, without getting into the technical details of SolarWinds and how basically the adversaries got in and moved laterally undetected. Microsoft stepped in, revoked the certificate, and caused millions of computers to basically immediately untrust a specific software. Our legal team, in about 48 hours, executed a domain takeover of the nation state C2 domain that was doing that attack. And again, a great example of how sharing security information across organizations is extremely helpful in the battlefield. And that's why we have our MISA partners, and we partnered, directly with our, three-letter, customers and so forth. So detecting something like we're working alongside, let's say a three-letter agency, and they start sharing an alert and eventually start blocking all that malware from the world. That's a good thing that we share all that information right across, right? So another important cyber topic we want to dig in today is zero trust. As we had mentioned, it's been around since 2005. For those of you who have gray hair like me, it was first introduced by the Jericho Cube. I always take time to give props to one of our competitors, Google. They were actually the first large company to spend a lot of money back in the day and actually start to deploy zero trust principles successfully across their base in the early days. It was, I think at that part, Microsoft got extremely aggressive. We were already digging into it a little bit, but Microsoft then got very aggressive with our capabilities in terms of how we deliver its principles by AI, Windows, and our integrated Defender capabilities, with which Chorn will get into right now. Take it away, Chorn. Hopefully your mic issues are
sure, yeah. Just like a quick comms check before I move forward, Jay.
You sound great, man. Perfect.
Awesome. So thank you again, Jay. If you want to go ahead and kick off the slide real quick, Jay, if you don't mind.
You got it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So again, everybody, just Jay mentioned, right, zero trust has kind of been a foundational thing for Microsoft for the better part of 10 years now. And what we did, we recognize the change. There's been a shift in security really in the last several years, going back, as Jay mentioned, right, 2005. But really, I think the global pandemic really accelerated a lot of that stuff. Right? It kind of put us on an accelerated path to like, hey, we need to get this stuff, taken care of, because we found out quickly that the traditional perimeter, your network-based model, your castle and moat model, so to speak, just couldn't adapt to the ever-growing change of what's going out there, right? Remote work. So, a lot of folks these days, many organizations have to support what we call hybrid work, right? So the securing access and giving folks access to corporate resources outside of your just local perimeter, coming on premises and just signing on that way. That's no longer the case these days, right? And also, in addition to that, users themselves it's not just employees, it's also contractors, there's partners, there's vendors, a slew of other folks that are actually involved in accessing your data. So as companies transition to this model, they're not just bringing your traditional common devices, right? They're using mobile devices, things like iOS devices, Android devices, so on and so forth. There's IoT as well that you have to factor in. So with all this new digital estate, it's growing, right? And it's making it way more complex for folks to actually, react, detect threats and react and respond to those threats. And bad actors actually know this. So they're taking advantage of it every day. I think since 2001, I think there is the amount of cloud-based attacks has increased tenfold. It's probably even higher today. So that's just the nature of the landscape we have in terms of corporate access, securing our resources. As people move to the cloud, people are connecting from what we call the dirty internet, right? So you have to protect not just your perimeter, but account for everybody accessing any data anywhere in the world these days. So in terms of zero trust adoption, governments, to include our DoD customers, obviously, are looking at zero trust and have recognized that, hey, this is a new paradigm shift that folks are, it's taking place right now. So we have to find ways and look at ways to secure our digital estate as everybody transitions to the cloud. Next slide, Jay. So when it comes to zero trust, again, the old assumption of if I'm in my network perimeter, I'm safe. That's no longer the case. So here at Microsoft, we have 3 key principles of zero trust that we abide by. The first one is verify explicitly. You don't know what you don't know. You always have to make decisions based on any available data points. That's including identity, location, device health, data classification, any anomalies that you may see on the endpoint, things like that. Using least privileged access, right? So limiting access to what we call just in time or just enough access, making sure that folks have just the right amount of access they need, nothing more, and also only access when they need it. So these are adaptive policies that we also use, and just no standing, you look at the old Active Directory model, for example, it's just standing access. If you have admin rights, then you have admin rights. Now we're trying to get away from that and actually, delegate specific rights at specific times for users to gain the access to just what they need. And then lastly, assume breach, right? So the digital, transformation of our security practice, right? We assume that our adversary is already in there. So how do we limit that blast radius, right? Do we take things like microsegmentation and encryption, making sure folks, if and when they're in, hopefully they don't get in, but if they do, how do we contain them and limit their access once they're in our network or our environment? So next slide, please, Jay. So zero trust, in essence, again, it's basically ensuring that every access request is strongly authenticated. Each user is authorized. You've got your policy constraints in there, and you're inspecting every data packet before granting access. It's everything from user identity, application hosting environment, making sure that any sort of breach is prevented as much as possible. And in addition to that, we also, again, need to limit the impact of any breach if that actually happens. So things like, again, segmentation policies, employing least privilege, employing just in time, and then using analytics as well in order to help detect and respond to any threats that get in, or again, try to come in as quickly as possible. Right. So in essence, go ahead, Jay, I'm sorry.
Nope, I was just going to point out, and using those AI engines, right, to do those analytics across each of those and adapt and see normalities with normal behaviors of devices, normal behaviors of applications, normal behaviors of users, and when those deviate, when those we can respond accordingly.
Absolutely, yeah. There are, as Jay mentioned, right, and Jay touched on earlier, there are AI ML backed models now that can detect those heuristics, right? When you're inspecting those signals, we're looking for anomalies. We're also at the same time not just looking for anomalies, but also helping folks out with AI to eliminate a lot of the noise, because there's a lot of overhead. You're getting all these signals coming in. Humans can only sift through so much. We understand your workforce is probably limited, right? So we have, AI will help with that aspect as well, where, you have all these signals coming in, what's noise, what's real. And that is also an aspect of, again, analyzing those signals and using AI and ML to determine or help, humans or a SOC determine whether or not that, signal is malicious, in fact, malicious, or just, some noise here and there. So again, but also really from the slide, the biggest thing is that, again, the safety based on network location, your perimeter based access is no longer adequate these days, right? And also the fact that zero trust is an ongoing thing. It's a journey. It's not a point in time, right? It's an ever evolving thing. Next slide, please. All right, so here at Microsoft, we have essentially 6 zero trust pillars. We have identities, devices and endpoints, data, apps, infrastructure, and network. And then, to tie that all together, we have visibility and analytics and automation. That's kind of the foundational, premise there that ties all these aspects together as a platform. So Jay, if you kind of step through the slide here. So when it comes to identities, one of the first things we want to know is, again, who's requesting access? Is that person essential? And validating that identity explicitly, right? You're not inferring they have access because they're using that username and password, right? So we're using strong authentication, MFA, things like that, and also assessing things like session risk, right? You think about impossible travel scenarios. That's an example. So if I'm signing in from here, where I'm in Alabama, and all of a sudden my user account's being signed in from Russia 20 minutes later, things like that, and making assessments based on that and granting access or denying access based on those signals. All right, next step through. All right, so yeah, again, so next thing is devices and endpoints, right? Knowing the device risk state. For us, again, it's Microsoft Defender Endpoint and Intune, looking at things like device compliance, and also, if my device is compliant, but I have malware on my box, that's a signal we also take into account in order to whether or not, we grant or block access to you, the user, and the device itself. All right. Another thing too is, of course, protecting your data. It's critical to know your data and to classify your data, right? And using things like Purview and Microsoft Information Protection to classify and also encrypt that data. And then applications. So, in terms of application access, like looking at things like application behavior, uncovering things like shadow IT, making sure that, applications have security built in at its core, right? So things like Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps can help, detect those anomalous behaviors, things like that. And then we move on to infrastructure and networking, right? So Defender for Cloud will let you govern and, look at the posture of your infrastructure, looking at things like your PaaS or IaaS services. In addition to that, also looking at your network infrastructure, adaptive hardening, things like that, monitoring your network, monitoring things like anomalous traffic patterns, things like that, through our Defender for Cloud product. And then really to tie it all together, it's policy-driven access through what we call Azure Active Directory conditional access. So it's gaining access based on role, again, location, behavior patterns, any data sensitivity, what application is accessing that, and then also your device security, right? So ensuring that policy is always enforced and continuously throughout the session, right? You don't just like, okay, you're in and you're good. Continuously monitoring that session is key to limiting any type of breach, because we have things like insider risk and things like that. So definitely taking that into account. And then also with Sentinel, automating the detection response, alleviating a lot of the anomalous traffic here and there, and also helping with reacting and responding to those threats as well. So next slide, please. So in a nutshell, again, it's not a implement this, and it's done, right? We have our zero trust solutions for Microsoft. There's our Microsoft 365 E5 suite, along with Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Sentinel, and networking. But it's an ongoing journey, right? It's adapting, changing. It's an always ever evolving process to achieve zero trust, and it's something that folks, have to get their minds wrapped around. And then, going back to things like, leveraging other tools, for example, as Jay mentioned, AI. So implementing AI in conjunction with these tools, can help secure and also reduce a lot of the overhead to achieve your zero trust, point in time, or not point in time, but state where you want to be at any given point in time. So
Excellent.